Derek stood at the edge of the balcony, his eyes scanning the horizon. The colony was quiet tonight, a stark contrast to the chaos he had experienced just days ago. The stars above were bright, shining like diamonds against the endless expanse of space. As a soldier, Derek had seen war up close, bloodshed, destruction, and the horrors that came with it. But standing here in this peaceful moment, he found himself at a crossroads. He was part of the human intergalactic peacekeeping force, stationed on a distant colony on the edge of enemy territory. His mission was simple: maintain order, protect the colony, and ensure that the peace talks between the various species in the galaxy remained intact. It was supposed to be a routine assignment, something to pass the time while the higher-ups sorted out the larger conflicts. But nothing ever stayed simple in the universe. As he turned to head back inside, a voice caught his attention. Derek. He turned to see a figure walking towards him, her silhouette framed by the dim lights of the corridor. It was Selena, the alien ambassador. Derek had met her only a few days ago, during the diplomatic dinner that had brought the various factions together. He remembered the way her presence had captivated the room, how her eyes, sharp and intelligent, seemed to see right through him. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. Selena, Derek greeted her with a nod, trying to hide the tension he felt. It wasn't that he didn't like her, far from it, but there was something about her that made him uneasy. She was beautiful, powerful, and intelligent, a combination that could either be a blessing or a curse. "You're out here alone again," she remarked, her voice smooth and calm, betraying no emotion. She stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. "I was just taking a break," Derek replied, glancing at the stars once more before meeting her gaze. "Needed some air." Selena smiled, a small, enigmatic curve of her lips. "I see. Well, I hope you're not getting too comfortable." Derek raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean by that?" She took a step closer, her eyes glinting in the soft light. "You know that peace we're fighting for, Derek. It's fragile, more fragile than you might think. One wrong move and it could all fall apart. You don't want to get too comfortable in this peace." Derek didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied her face. There was something in her eyes, something that told him she wasn't just talking about the galaxy. She was talking about something deeper, something more personal. But what was it? "I understand the stakes, Selena," he said, his voice steady. "I'm doing my part." "You're not the only one working towards peace." She laughed softly, but it wasn't a laugh of amusement. It was a laugh of knowing, as though she understood something he didn't. "Of course you are, but this isn't just about peace, Derek, not really." He frowned. "What are you saying?" Instead of answering directly, Selena took a step back, her gaze turning distant. "I'm saying that some things are bigger than peace. Some things are bigger than the galaxy." Derek blinked, unsure of what she meant. But before he could ask, she looked back at him, her expression now more serious than ever. "I will marry you," she said, her voice low but clear, each word landing with a weight he hadn't expected. For a moment, Derek stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what she had just said. Marry him? The thought was so absurd, so out of left field, that he couldn't help but laugh. "You must be joking," he said, shaking his head. "We've barely even had a conversation." But Selena's face didn't change. Her eyes remained steady, unwavering. There was no hint of jest in her gaze. "No," she said softly, but with a firmness that left no room for doubt. "I'm not joking." Derek's laughter died in his throat. He stared at her, his mind racing. Was she serious? Surely this was some kind of test, maybe a cultural thing. Aliens had strange customs after all, but this was something else. "I don't understand," he said finally, his voice quieter now. "Why would you say something like that?" Selena stepped forward again, her presence commanding the space between them. "Because it's the only way to secure peace, the only way to ensure that humanity and every other species in the galaxy has a future." Derek shook his head. "This is crazy." "I'm just a soldier, Selena. I'm not some political pawn. I'm not someone's marriage proposal to fix everything." She regarded him for a moment as if weighing his words. Then she spoke again, her voice soft yet firm. "Derek, this isn't a proposal for love. It's a proposal for survival. The galaxy is on the brink of destruction. If we don't unite, if we don't forge this bond, it could all fall apart." Derek didn't know how to respond. He had heard the rumors about alien politics, about alliances and marriages that were more than just personal decisions. But to be part of something like that, to be chosen for something as important as this, it was too much. Too much for someone like him. "I can't be a part of this," he said, his voice resolute. I didn't sign up for a galactic wedding. Selena's eyes softened, but only slightly. You don't have a choice, Derek. This is bigger than both of us, and it's already started. The war, the alliances, everything. We're at the center of it all now. Derek turned away, his mind spinning. This was madness. But as he stood there looking out at the stars, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting. He didn't know what Selena's true intentions were, but she was right about one thing. Everything was changing. And he was caught in the middle of it. Before he could speak again, a voice crackled through his communicator, interrupting their conversation. Derek, come in. We've got a situation. The colony has been attacked. We need you back at the base. Now. Derek's heart sank. The war had finally reached them. He glanced back at Selena, who had already turned to leave. We'll talk about this later, she said, her voice calm and collected, as though this was just another part of the plan. But Derek wasn't so sure. Something had shifted, something he couldn't ignore. He had no idea what Selena's proposal truly meant, but one thing was clear. His life was no longer his own. And the galaxy was about to change in ways he couldn't predict. Derek's heart was racing as he sprinted through the narrow corridors of the base, his boots pounding against the cold metal floor. The alarm blared above him, a steady, nerve-wracking wail that echoed through the walls. His mind raced, trying to process the chaos around him. The colony was under attack, again. He had barely wrapped his head around Selena's proposal when the call came in. He didn't have time to think about her strange words, her claim of a galactic marriage. All that mattered now was surviving the immediate threat. There would be time later to figure out what she meant, why she'd said what she said. But for now, the enemy was at the gates, and Derek had a job to do. As he reached the control room, he saw the team already in motion. They were trying to get a handle on the situation, but the enemy forces were overwhelming. The enemy fleet had breached their perimeter, and from the looks of it, they weren't stopping anytime soon. Derek, thank God you're here, shouted Captain Ortiz, the leader of the peacekeeping unit. Her face was tense, her brow furrowed with worry. We need to launch countermeasures, but the systems are down. We're running out of time. Derek nodded, already stepping to the control panel. His fingers flew over the buttons, his mind clicking into soldier mode as he assessed the situation. He didn't have time for distractions. The survival of the colony was his responsibility now, not whatever Selena had in mind with her mysterious proposal. Captain, we'll get the defenses up, he said, focusing on the task at hand. You need to get the civilians to the underground bunkers. The last thing we want is to lose innocent lives. Ortiz hesitated for a moment, but then gave a sharp nod. We're counting on you, Derek. With that, Derek turned back to the console, his heart racing. The enemy ships were closing in, their energy readings spiking as they prepared to strike. He had only minutes before they reached the heart of the colony. The pressure was unbearable, but Derek couldn't afford to falter now. The lives of countless people were at stake. He slammed his fist onto the launch button. The defense systems activated with a loud hum, sending out a barrage of energy blasts toward the incoming ships. But the enemy was relentless. Their shields held strong, and the blasts barely made a dent. Derek cursed under his breath. He needed something more, something they hadn't planned for. Suddenly, the door to the control room opened, and Selena walked in, her face calm as ever. Despite the chaos around her, she moved with purpose, her eyes focused and unwavering. Derek couldn't understand how she remained so composed in the face of danger, but he didn't have time to question it now. You should be in the safe room, Derek said, his voice sharp. This place is going down. I'm not going anywhere, Selena replied, her voice steady. You're going to need help, and you're going to need more than just the defense systems if you want to survive. Derek shot her a confused look. What are you talking about? These ships are too powerful. We can't fight them off with our current setup. Selena's lips curled into a faint smile, but there was no humor in her expression. I told you, Derek, it's not just about peace. It's about survival, and it's about what you're willing to risk to protect everything you care about. Before Derek could respond, she moved toward the far wall of the control room, her hands working with an ease that suggested she was familiar with the technology. She touched a panel, and a hidden compartment slid open. Inside was a small, sleek device, something Derek had never seen before. It looked alien, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly glow. What is that? He asked, stepping closer, his curiosity piqued. This, Selena said, lifting the device, is the key to saving the colony. It's an ancient piece of technology from my people. The power it contains could wipe out the entire enemy fleet in an instant. Derek's eyes widened in disbelief. You have something like that? Why didn't you mention it before? Selina's eyes met his, and for the first time there was a flicker of something human in them, something vulnerable. I wasn't sure you were ready to understand, but now there's no choice. The fate of this colony and your people depends on it. Derek didn't have time to process her words. The enemy ships were too close now, their weapons primed and ready to fire. Without thinking, he grabbed the device from her hands. Let's do this, he said, his voice filled with determination. Selina nodded, and together they moved to the center of the control room. Derek inserted the device into a terminal, watching as the screens around him flickered to life. The power readings shot up, and the air seemed to hum with energy. What do we do now? Derek asked, his fingers trembling slightly as he held onto the device. Activate the core, Selina instructed. It will channel the energy through the colony's defense grid. The burst will be enough to destroy the enemy fleet. Derek's mind raced as he followed her instructions. He didn't fully understand how this alien technology worked, but he didn't have time to question it. With a deep breath, he pressed the activation button. The room shook as the core powered up, its energy building to an overwhelming intensity. The hum grew louder, almost deafening, and for a brief moment, Derek felt as though the entire colony was vibrating with the force of the energy. He looked over at Selina, who was standing beside him, her expression resolute. It's working, Derek said, a sense of awe creeping into his voice. The lights in the control room flickered, and for a moment everything went silent. Then, without warning, the sky outside the windows exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The enemy ships, caught in the blast, were disintegrated in an instant. A shockwave rippled through the air, shaking the colony to its core. Derek staggered back, barely able to keep his balance as the force of the explosion rocked the building. The flashing lights dimmed, and for a moment the room was plunged into darkness. But then the emergency lights kicked in, casting a soft glow over the room. We did it, Derek breathed, his heart still pounding in his chest. He looked over at Selina, who was standing beside him, her face calm, as though this was just another day at the office. We did, she agreed, her voice quiet but filled with conviction. Derek shook his head, still trying to wrap his mind around everything that had just happened. He had never seen anything like it, but there was no time to dwell on it. The enemy was gone, but there were still consequences to face. He had just used an ancient alien weapon to save the colony. But what did that mean for him? What did it mean for humanity? Selina seemed to read his thoughts. You're probably wondering why I didn't tell you about the device earlier, she said, her voice soft. Derek nodded, not sure if he was ready for the answer. But Selina continued, her tone more serious than before. Because I needed to know you could make the right choice. I needed to know that you would act when it counted. That you would understand the stakes of what we're fighting for. Derek met her gaze, his heart heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. And what exactly are we fighting for, Selina? He asked, his voice quiet but filled with uncertainty. Selina didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked over to the window and looked out at the remains of the enemy fleet, now scattered across the atmosphere. After a moment, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. We're fighting for the future, Derek. The future of every species in the galaxy, and the only way to secure that future is through unity, through sacrifice, and through love. Derek's heart skipped a beat at her words. Love, was that what she meant all along? Was this marriage proposal, this union, really about something greater than just politics? Before he could ask any more questions, the door to the control room opened, and Captain Ortiz stepped inside, her face filled with relief. You did it, Derek. You saved us. The enemy is gone. Derek nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He looked over at Selina, who was watching him with an unreadable expression. He had no answers yet, no answers about what she had meant, but one thing was clear, he was no longer just a soldier. He was part of something much bigger than himself, and the galaxy would never be the same. The days after the attack passed in a blur. The colony had been saved, but the victory came at a cost. Derek had done what he had to do, and now, as he sat in his quarters, staring out the window at the stars, he couldn't help but feel the weight of everything that had happened. The battle, the destruction, and the strange proposal that Selina had made. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and he was right in the center of it. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes still focused on the vast expanse of space. He should have felt relief. The enemy was gone, the colony was safe, and the peace talks were moving forward. But something was gnawing at him. Selina's words, her mysterious proposal, they echoed in his mind constantly. I will marry you. What did it all mean? What was she really asking him? He had never thought of himself as anything special, just a soldier doing his job. He wasn't a hero, and he certainly wasn't anyone's ideal choice for a political marriage, let alone one that would change the fate of the entire galaxy. And yet here he was, stuck in the middle of something much bigger than he ever imagined. Derek had always been a man of action. He didn't like to sit and think too much. But this was different. This wasn't just another mission. It wasn't just about surviving the day. It was about the future, his future, and the future of humanity. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. He didn't have to ask who it was. Come in, he called, his voice tired but steady. The door slid open, and Selina stepped inside, her presence as commanding as ever. Despite everything that had happened, she still carried herself with an aura of calm confidence. Her eyes met his, and for a moment there was something almost human in them. It was strange, but in that brief moment, Derek saw her not as an alien ambassador or a powerful leader, but as someone who was just as lost as he was. You're still thinking about it? She said quietly, closing the door behind her. Derek didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. Selina knew him too well by now. She had a way of reading people, of understanding their thoughts before they even spoke them, and right now she was reading him perfectly. I can't stop thinking about it, Derek admitted, his voice rough. What you said. I don't get it. Why me? Why now? Why this? Selina walked over to the small window beside him, her eyes following the stars outside. I wish I could give you a simple answer, she said softly. But the truth is, this isn't something that can be explained in a few words. It's bigger than you and me, bigger than the war. It's about the future of every species in the galaxy. Derek shook his head. I'm not the right person for this. I'm just a soldier. I'm not someone who can change the fate of entire civilizations. You're more than that, Selina said, her voice firm. She turned to face him now, her gaze intense. You just don't see it yet. Derek felt a pang of frustration. I'm not some political tool, Selina. I don't want to be used for some bigger plan. I want to know what's real. I want to know if this proposal is about us or just about your people's agenda. Selina's expression softened and she moved closer. It's both, she said quietly. It's about peace, yes, but it's also about something deeper, something we can only achieve if we work together. She paused, her eyes searching his. I can't explain everything to you all at once, but I can promise you this isn't just about politics, it's about the survival of everyone, the future of humanity, Derek, and your future too. Derek stared at her, his mind racing. He didn't want to believe it, but part of him knew she wasn't lying. There was something in her eyes, something that told him she wasn't just manipulating him. She believed in what she was saying, and that made him question everything he thought he knew about the galaxy. About peace, about what it meant to be human. You're asking me to marry you, Derek said, his voice quiet. And you're asking me to believe that this is about saving everyone, but I don't know if I can trust that. I don't know if I can trust you. Selina stood still, her gaze unwavering. I'm asking you to trust me, Derek. I'm asking you to take a leap of faith, just as I have. If we don't act now, if we don't make this decision, the consequences will be far worse than anything you can imagine. Derek closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. He couldn't run from this. Whatever Selina's plan was, it was already in motion. The galaxy was already changing, and he was part of that change, whether he liked it or not. I don't know if I can marry you, Selina, he said quietly, but I'm willing to fight for something bigger than myself. I'll help you. I'll do whatever it takes. Selina's eyes softened, and she stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. That's all I'm asking, Derek. A chance. They stood there for a moment, the weight of everything hanging between them. The room was silent, the only sound the soft hum of the colony's machinery in the background. Derek didn't know if he was making the right choice, but he knew he couldn't turn back now. There was no going back. The next few days were a blur of meetings, strategies, and long hours spent trying to prepare for what was to come. Derek found himself caught up in Selina's world, a world where politics, war, and diplomacy collided. But even as he worked alongside her, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was still an outsider. He didn't belong in this world. He wasn't a leader. He was just a soldier, but Selina never treated him like one. She treated him like an equal, and that made all the difference. As they worked together, Derek began to see the bigger picture. The galaxy was on the brink of something massive, something that could either unite all the species or tear them apart. And Selina was right, this wasn't just about politics, it was about survival. The universe was a vast, dangerous place, and the only way they were going to make it through was by working together. One evening, as they sat together in the war room discussing the latest intelligence reports, Selina looked over at Derek, her expression thoughtful. "You're starting to understand, aren't you?" she said softly. Derek met her gaze, and for the first time he felt something inside him shift. He wasn't just doing this for the colony. He wasn't just doing it for the galaxy. He was doing it for himself. For the chance to be part of something greater, something worth fighting for. "I think I am," he said quietly, and with that the final pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Derek didn't know what the future held, but he was ready to face it. With Selina by his side, he would fight for peace, for humanity, and for the chance to build something better. And maybe, just maybe, he would learn to believe in the future they were building together. The days turned into weeks, and Derek found himself deeply immersed in the whirlwind of politics and diplomacy that surrounded him. The war was far from over, but the enemy forces were retreating, and for the first time there was a glimmer of hope. The peace talks were moving forward, albeit slowly, and Selina's influence seemed to be spreading across the galaxy. Derek, despite his doubts, was beginning to see the plan come together. But there was still something nagging at him, a question that he couldn't shake. What was he truly a part of? He had agreed to help to fight for something greater, but the deeper he got into this, the more questions he had. He had never been the kind of person who looked too far ahead. His job had always been simple: follow orders, fight when needed, and survive. But now he was tangled in something much bigger, something he didn't fully understand. One evening, after another long day of meetings and strategizing, Derek found himself standing in front of the windows of his quarters again, looking out at the stars. The peaceful expanse of space always made him feel small, insignificant. But tonight, there was something different about it. It felt less like an endless void and more like a future waiting to unfold. He didn't know where it was leading, but he couldn't help but feel a pull, a sense of purpose that had been missing from his life before. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. He didn't need to ask who it was. "Come in," Derek called, his voice tired but steady. The door slid open and Selina entered. She was as composed as ever, her expression calm and focused. But there was something different about her tonight. There was a quiet intensity in her eyes, a sense of urgency that Derek hadn't seen before. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice low. Derek nodded and gestured for her to sit. "What's going on?" Selina hesitated for a moment before speaking, her gaze flickering to the window. "The peace talks are faltering," she said, her tone serious. "The factions are at a breaking point. We're on the verge of an all-out war, Derek, and if that happens, everything we've worked for, everything we've sacrificed, will be destroyed." Derek felt a chill run down his spine. He had known the situation was precarious, but hearing it so plainly made it feel real. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice steady but laced with concern. "We fight," Selina replied, her gaze locking with his. "But not in the way you think. The war isn't just on the battlefield. It's political, it's psychological, and it's about the hearts and minds of the people." Derek furrowed his brow. "You're talking about manipulation, using people as pawns." "No," Selina said sharply. "I'm talking about uniting them. This isn't about controlling anyone. It's about giving them hope, a reason to fight for something bigger than themselves." She stood up, moving toward the table where the galaxy maps were spread out. Her fingers traced the paths of the various factions, the star systems that had once been rivals, now forced to cooperate or face certain destruction. "There's a way to do this," Selina continued. "A way to make them see that we're stronger together than apart. We have to show them that peace is the only path forward." Derek watched her, listening intently. He had always been good at following orders, at carrying out missions, but this was different. This wasn't about tactical decisions or fighting battles. This was about something deeper, something that went beyond survival. He stood up and walked over to her, his mind racing. "And what do you need me to do?" Selina turned to him, her eyes softening. "I need you to trust me, Derek. I need you to stand by my side, not just as a soldier, but as something more, as a symbol." Derek's heart skipped a beat. "A symbol?" he repeated, his voice thick with confusion. "Yes," Selina said, her voice steady. "A symbol of unity." of what humanity can achieve when they join forces with the rest of the galaxy. You've already proven your loyalty, your courage. Now it's time to take that to the next level. She stepped closer to him, her gaze never leaving his. I've asked you to marry me, Derek. But this isn't just about me. It's about the future of humanity, the future of the galaxy. Derek's mind reeled. He had always known that there was more to this than just a simple proposal, but he had never fully understood the stakes. Now, standing here with Selena, he was beginning to see the bigger picture. I don't know if I'm ready for all of this, he admitted, his voice quiet. Selena reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch warm and reassuring. No one ever is. But we don't have a choice, Derek. We're the ones who have to make it work. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of the situation hung between them, but in that silence, something shifted. Derek had always been a soldier, someone who followed orders without question. But now he was faced with a choice that would determine not just his future, but the future of everyone he had ever known. I'll do it, he said finally, his voice strong. I'll stand by you, I'll fight for the galaxy, and I'll fight for the future. Selena smiled, her expression softening with gratitude. Thank you, Derek, together we can do this. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Derek found himself swept up in the urgency of the situation, his days filled with long meetings, intense discussions, and strategizing. But as the days passed, something began to change within him. The more he worked with Selena, the more he realized that this wasn't just about peace. It was about something far more profound. It was about creating a future where humanity could thrive, where different species could come together and build something stronger than the sum of their parts. Derek had never been a man of idealism. He had always been practical, focused on the here and now. But Selena had a way of making him see beyond the immediate. She had a vision for the galaxy, one that wasn't just about surviving, but about building something greater. And for the first time, Derek felt a spark of hope. A hope that maybe, just maybe, they could make this work. As the peace talks resumed, Derek took on a more visible role. He was no longer just a soldier in the background. He was becoming a symbol, just as Selena had said. The media began to cover him more frequently, his face appearing on broadcasts across the galaxy. His name became synonymous with the peace effort, a symbol of unity in a time of division. But with this new role came new challenges. Derek was no longer just fighting for survival. He was fighting for the future of the galaxy, and the pressure weighed heavily on him. There were days when he doubted himself, when he questioned whether he was truly the right person for this. But every time he looked at Selena, he found the strength to keep going. She believed in him, and that belief made all the difference. One evening, as they sat together in the war room, reviewing the latest developments, Derek looked over at Selena, his mind still buzzing with the enormity of what they were trying to accomplish. "We're doing it, aren't we?" he said, his voice filled with awe. Selena met his gaze, a proud smile crossing her face. "Yes, we are," Derek nodded, his heart swelling with a sense of purpose. This was no longer just about a marriage proposal. It was about the future they were building together. And for the first time in his life, Derek felt like he was part of something greater than himself. He was fighting for something that mattered. And as he looked out at the stars, he realized that the future was not just waiting to unfold. It was being forged, one decision at a time. And he was ready to face it, no matter what came next.